Ja, god dag, kjære seere. Vi ønsker dere velkommen tilbake til oss, Frikanalen Trond kvarter. Og programmet i dag, det kommer til å foregå på engelsk, for vi har en spennende, internasjonal, velkjent personlighet som vi skal snakke med i dag. Han sitter i New York, og vi ser frem til et intervju, en samtale med Rabbi Weiss, en velkjent rabbiner, jødisk rabbiner altså. So we welcome you, Rabbi Weiss. It is an honor for us to have you with us. Most welcome to this program, and we look forward to having a talk with you, Rabbi.
Yes, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so sanctify His name, and inshallah, bring peace to the world, and with inshallah soon a resolution, a freedom for Palestine and the Palestinian people. Now, as you mentioned, my name is Rabbi Weiss. I am a spokesperson for Neturei Karta, International Jews United Against Zionism. And the question that you're asking is of the core problem, the core issue. It touches the core issue of this whole Nekba that was suffering for so many, over 73 years. Why is people are puzzled that a rabbi, somebody who is obviously, according to their attire, as I am, affiliated and bound by the Jewish law, why would I oppose Zionism in the state of Israel? It seems puzzling to people, and this point that it's puzzling reaches into the core, into the essence of the problem, because on the contrary, because we are Jewish, because we are bound and attached to the Judaism, to our Jewish religion, that is why we stand in opposition. And the more one is attached to the Jewish religion, the more they should be outspoken and clear in their opposition to the mere existence of the Zionist state of Israel, to this movement called Zionism, which is the backbone, which is the reason for the existence of the state of Israel. And with God's help, I will try to explain this Zionism. The ideology of the state of Israel is a movement that declares a transformation from what Judaism was for this last 3,000 years into something entirely different. It declares that it is a transformation from subservience to God, from religion to uphold the words of the Torah, into a base nationalism, a material concept, people to have their own state, their own sovereignty, to be a proud nation amongst the nations of the world. They should have an army. They should have. They should be winning Nobel Peace prizes. They should be an Olympic team should be a gold medal winner, and so forth. They should be from the leading nations in the world. That is what they strive, and what their concept of what they should be, what Judaism is, and what the Jewish people should be. We as Jews abhor this. We detest this and declare unequivocally that what they're doing is simply abusing and misrepresenting our religion. They're stealing this movement, Zionism, and its representatives are simply attempting to hijack our holy religion, our covenant with God, our 3,000-year-old religion, where we made a covenant with God to uphold the words of His Torah 3,000 years ago. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, stood on Mount Sinai and accepted the Torah from God, made a covenant with God, where God tells us that we are obliged to uphold all the words of the Torah. And in the Torah, it states that we shall not steal, we shall not kill, that and all the 613 commandments. Zionism, this movement, declares that they are free from anything that's binding them to God. Now, they may call themselves, in order to be from the most forward countries, that they're a liberal country, that they declare, although it's a farce, that's not that what they declare either, not, but they could declare themselves a democracy, and they proudly declare that you do not have to be attached to any religion, or you can be from any religion, or you can do whatever you want. You can be an atheist, and everything is fine as long as you support the existence of the State of Israel. You can see the pictures of the rabbis and what it means to be a Jew. I mean, this is the picture when our chief rabbi in the 1920s, Rabbi, who was the chief rabbi, he was always in the Jewish quarters who were living in Palestine, that was under the Turkish rule. The Ottoman Empire, for instance, Jews have been living hundreds and hundreds of years in Palestine, and we had a Jewish community that was living there, and that was entirely was a God-fearing community. They upheld this Torah that I'm talking about. They understood, it was no question what it means to be a Jew, to uphold the Torah. And these are the pictures of the rabbis and of our great leaders, our rabbis of that time. We have pictures of wherever you will go see Jews. These are pictures from demonstrations, but basically very religious people with beards, with covering their heads and so forth. And this is from a picture from a demonstration from the White House, in front of the White House, from the religious Jews against the Zionist state. But I'm just trying to point out how Jews dress, what their attires and what they look like. They're God-fearing. They cover their heads, and while the picture of a Zionists that declared the state, that tried to make an ersatz Judaism, a transformation into something else. This is a picture of the Declaration of Independence in 1948 in the Independence Hall, where you find Ben Gurion reading the Declaration of Independence, and you see a picture of the Herzl, and here's all the people sitting at the dais, and as you note, they're all beardless. None of them are covering their heads. Theodor Herzl's beard was only for style, had nothing to do with godliness. He didn't cover his head, and he was absolutely not religious. He detested the religion, as we will later show. But this is the picture of what the Zionist movement was. And they have the audacity. Imagine making a Muslim country where you won't find one imam, one sheikh, one ayatollah, and so forth. And so what a farce this is. They're representing, they use the Star of David, the Holy Star of David, and the name Israel, and the menorah on their pictures, and they're all claiming that this is a Jewish state. What makes this a Jewish state when Judaism was that the Jewish people, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the 12 tribes, went and made a covenant with God on Mount Sinai to uphold the 613 commandments. And these people profess clearly, proudly, that they do not keep the Sabbath, they don't keep the 10 commandments, and so forth. So the difference between these two is stark, is clear, and something is wrong here. So that's the first issue, that Zionism in truth has nothing with Judaism. On the contrary, it is contradictory to our religion. It is a transformation from subservience to God, religion, into nationalism, and its sacrifices on the altar of their goal, of their Zionism, anything that stands in its way, whether it will be Palestinian people, whether it will be Jewish people, whoever stands in opposition to them, they wipe off the map, they attempt to wipe off the map, and so forth. So that is the first issue.
May I just interrupt you 1 second, Rabbi, because another question in my head, and thank you for your good talking. Indeed, this is very, very important. But you make a very clear separation, the distance between Judaism as a religion on the one hand, and Zionism on the other hand. But those of us who share your points of view and appreciate your very, very good work indeed, and also would like to stress the separation between Judaism on one hand and Zionism on the other hand. We are said to be anti-Semites, Jew haters. How is it possible that with this clear distinction between Judaism and Zionism, it seems difficult to be against Zionism because then you are attacked as a kind of anti-Semite, isn't then there must be some connection, or there is no connection? And how you explain this position that some of us should be anti-Semites while we are supporting, respecting Judaism on one hand, and at the same time are against Zionism? What is this kind of thinking, please?
Yeah, it's truly astounding, and it's horrific. This accusation, this constant accusation thrown at people of being anti-Semitic. But we have to, again, remember, we are accusing them of being thieves. We are accusing them of being immoral because they're using a religion, a holy religion, to create their state, their goal. We are not accusing them of being inefficient. They are unfortunately very efficient. And what they're doing is that's what the attack on people for claiming that they are anti-Semitic is just one ploy, one of their modus operandi that they use. For instance, constantly Jews who are living in Palestine are brutally beaten. They're subjected to oppression, to arrest, and to actually the murder of many of our colleagues throughout the time. Maybe the first well-known famous person who was assassinated was a Dr. Dahan in the 1920s because he stood up in opposition and said, I'm going to go to British Parliament and to reveal to the British Parliament that they're being conned, that this is not Judaism and it's not the will of the Jewish people to have a state in Palestine. In fact, this was the reason of this meeting that I showed you the picture of Rabbi Sonnenfeld. Remember, again, I was talking about the chief rabbi of Palestine at the time in the 1920s. The Jewish people that were residing in Palestine had their rabbinate and a chief rabbi, and that chief rabbi was very concerned about this new movement, this relatively new movement of Zionism that started in 1880s, 1890s, and he would just, and he, after by 1920, they were a force of a movement of power and of terror, and therefore he met with the king of Transjordan, this Rabbi Sonnenfeld of blessed memory, and gave over the loyalty of the community, of the Jewish community, and told them that the whole Jewish community that was residing there for hundreds of years is actually is loyal citizens to the ruling leaders of the Muslim and Arab world, and they want to continue to be so. And let's just take a step further. In 1947, when the United Nations sent a delegation to Palestine to make a discovery, to find out what to do about this problem of the agitation and the rift and the fighting that's going on in Palestine. And they decided they were going to ratify a so-called Jewish state. So the chief rabbi of this Jewish community that was residing for hundreds of years met with the delegation of the United Nations, and he pleaded with them. And I'm showing this is the United Nations documents, Declaration before the United Nations in July 16, 1947, a year prior to the ratification of the State of Israel. And this is what he said: we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was the voice of the Jews who are living there. This is the picture of that meeting. This is Rabbi Dushinsky. At that time, that Rabbi Sonnenfeld had passed on, and this was the chief rabbi at the time, Rabbi Dushinsky. And he said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This is the view, and what Jews always stood fast, that it's against our Torah. We don't want the so-called Jewish state where you're going to steal and kill, that flies in the face of the words of the Torah that you're not allowed to steal and not allowed to kill. Now, at the same time, the world is silent, continuing even till today, to the beating of Jews. It happens to be when they were ratified, unfortunately, by the United Nations. So our rabbis continually demonstrated. We don't carry guns, but they stood on the streets and demonstrated. We demonstrated in front of the United Nations. We continually demonstrate. And again, there's so many pictures of these demonstrations. This is in front of the Congress. These are pictures in front of the. This is in Jerusalem. This is hundreds of thousands of people gathering in the streets of Jerusalem, where the Jewish community till today still resides, and they're anti-Zionist. Again, you could go in New York. This is in front of, so you see, and all these are religious Jews, and they're demonstrating. And at the same time, we have pictures of what's happening, how the brutality of the Zionists. You can see here children, mere young children, how they're brutally attacked, arrested, and none of us carry guns. There's no accusation that we're going to harm them, and yet from the young to the boys and girls, any boy and girl turns 17 becomes a criminal because we refuse to serve in their mandatory service in the IDF. And here you can see a girl, they're arrested because she's carrying a prayer book and crying because we refuse to serve in their army. Young children, old men, they're brutally beaten, they're arrested and actually murdered. And yet the world is silent. So not only to the accusation of anti-Semitism that the world seems to be silent and they're getting away with, but the mass wholesale oppression of the Jewish people that are living in Palestine, that were living there in peace and harmony with the Palestinian people for hundreds and hundreds of years. These people are also subject to the oppression and the terror of the Zionist regime, and yet the world is silent. Why? The question is better than the answer, but we can say maybe, first of all, we believe that it's because we were God-fearing people and believe that everything is a master plan, and that's the works of the Satan, that this can go on, that the United Nations can ratify a so-called Jewish state, which will automatically be a divide and a point of contention in a land that was the majority Muslim people. And the second largest inhabitants were the Christians, and then there were the Jews who were living in peace and harmony in the same courtyards, and yet they took this land and divided it and gave it to them, calling it a Jewish state, which automatically would mean that it's not a free democracy because you're calling it a Jewish state. It's not a Jewish state, as we said, but that in and of itself, that they could, it's astounding and mind-blowing how they could ratify such a concept. But whatever it may be, this so-called Jewish state is not Jewish. It's a nationalism. It flies in the face of the religion. I was mentioning that we're not allowed to steal and kill. We're also, as a Jewish people, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, Jews are forbidden to have their own sovereignty. This is a decree of God. It's in the books of our teachings of the Torah. It's a prophecy of King Solomon that God said that when we will be dispersed in exile, as it's clear in every book of all the prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, that we are not to attempt to reestablish a so-called Jewish sovereignty in any part of the world, even if it would be with the will of the inhabitants of that land. Or even in an uninhabited land, we are not to create a Jewish sovereignty. So this concept of making the Jewish state was only able to be made because it was made by these non-religious people who simply scoffed and ridiculed the Torah and had nothing to do with the Torah. They're the ones who are claiming they have a Jewish state, but it has nothing with religion. We decry this. We declare very, very openly to the world that what they're doing is they're committing a fraud. They're using our religion to intimidate, and what they're doing is when anybody stands up and says what you're doing is criminal, they call them an anti-Semite, and they use the suffering of my grandparents, my family, and all the many Jews who suffered by Hitler and were murdered by Hitler, as my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz, and the majority of both my father and mother's families of blessed memory were murdered by the Nazis, and in Hungary and in Poland and so forth, and of course the other Jews in Ukraine and throughout all Eastern Europe. These they use this they use the complacency of the world that was silent when these Jews were murdered. They're using the guilt feeling of the world. They use that to gain support, to glean support around the world for the establishment of their state. They use this guilt ride. They say, you were silent, and now you're not going to help us. You're going to again be silent. You're not going to help us establish a state. So they use this concept of the Holocaust, of the suffering of the Jews, to establish the state and intimidate others. And anybody who dares speak up against the evil, the criminal act that they do, the oppression of the Palestinians, they accuse them of being anti-Semitic. And like I said, at the same time, they beat and murder, assassinate, and arrest the Jewish people who are living there, and the world is silent, which is beyond belief. What does this mean? Why is the world silent to the oppression of the Jewish people and the voice of the Jews around the world, the hundreds of thousands of Jews who invariably, if the more the religious they are, the Jewish communities, they stand up in opposition to the existence of the state. And yet the world is silent and ignores this voice. And there's a reason for that, as I say, because it has to do with how close we are in time to the Holocaust and what the Nazis did. And the people are very fearful of this, of what happened with this colossal, this tragedy, this the assassination of all these, the genocide of all these Jewish people, and they feel that somehow or other they're touching a live wire if they somehow or other stand in the way of this establishment of a Zionist state of Israel.
But Rabbi Weiss, yes. I think this is very, very important points which you present to us, and it is very important indeed that these are understood by people, so we appreciate highly that you are explaining it, telling what is the real history, the unjust act of the Zionist politicians. And this is one example which I now show to those who are with us. Expelling the Arabs. This is an article from Newsweek stating how the Zionists, how they expelled the Palestinian Arabs. In this article, the Israeli army, the Zionist army, had taken Lodda and other cities, and 50,000 civilian Palestinians were expelled to make room for this new Zionist state of Israel. So I think this kind of history is important for us to remind that there is a basic injustice, a basic crime under the legs of the state of Israel. If that is correct in your point of view, that the basic elements in the state of Israel is based on expulsion, occupation, and even maybe racism in the present state of Israel. If you agree on these points, or if you have comments on them, actually, what is the character of the present state of Israel? What is the character of Zionism as an ideology, please?
Yes, I definitely, unfortunately, I have to agree with that. I have to let me add. We have, many books we put out. I'm leaning over there just to reach there. But I get one at hand. I have just a book that we compiled. It's called Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, Historical Documents. And we compiled many of the documents of both the Zionists and of the rabbis who opposed Zionism. It is just something to note. And we'll profess this with a picture of how the Jewish people, we always lived together in harmony. We lived in the same courtyards. I have many of my colleagues who, and some who are very senior, they're in their 70s, their 80s and 90s, and they still could tell stories about how they lived in the old city together in peace. Thank God, our community goes and demonstrates together with the Palestinian people many times whether it is in Washington, whether it is in the Arab neighborhoods, or is it in front of the UN. And they all the old and senior people or the young people of the Muslim and Arab community talk about how we used to live together, and they always have beautiful anecdotes of how we helped each other until today. There are many people who still have a little connection, with Jewish families, with the Muslim and Arab families. So we always actually live together in peace. And our rabbis still remember, for instance, their Yasin, and they talk with such hurt, with such frustration about how we were living together and they were so friendly and helpful. And all of a sudden, this Zionist movement, real terrorists, whether it was the Haganah, whether it was the Lehi, Irgun, these are factions of today, the IDF. These were movements of the Zionist terrorist groups that were there prior to the establishment of the State of Israel, where they got an official name, Israeli Defense Force. But prior to that, they were groups, terrorist groups, just plain open terrorist groups, Irgun, Lehi, as I say, and so forth. And they were attacking these Arab villages, and they attacked, for instance, Deir Yassin, which was a very friendly people that were living together with the Jewish people, and they massacred them. And our rabbis were, just recently we had a great rabbi who passed away this last year, Rabbi Becker, blessed memory, and they talked about how when this happened, the people in the Jewish community, they didn't know what to do, and when his voice would tremble when he would talk about this, and they cried. We cry with the suffering of the Palestinian, of the Arab people, and what was done to them throughout this history of the expulsion of the Arab people, the Muslim people, and the oppression and everything, the whole Nekva, the assassination of the people of Palestine. This is totally contrary to our Torah. When not only are we not to kill or steal, but on top of that, we are required, according to our teaching of the Torah, to show gratitude for good done to us. And now anybody knows the history of Jewish people knows, of course, that there was the Crusades and there was the Inquisition, where people were given the choice of either converting out of their religion from Judaism to become Christians. If not, they were burnt at the stake. They were tortured and burnt. And yet, so what the Jews did, and many were expelled from the lands in Spain, and they went and they and it was the Muslim countries that opened their arms and took us in, and embraced us and gave us a home, and we were able to flourish and give out our greatest rabbis for those few hundred years. We put out our greatest rabbis, and we coexisted as distinctly Jewish people amongst Muslim and Arab people, distinctly Muslim, and so the difference of religion was never a reason for this rift or hate. So it was nothing to do with this problem today of this Nekba. In other words, the conflict has nothing to do with the difference of religion, and the Zionism makes a narrative that it's the Muslim and Arabs detest the Jewish people. They refuse to accept the Jewish people, and they're evil. And the Muslim and Arabs are the villains, and the Jewish people who are trying to settle there are victims. Now, on the contrary, that is so immoral and just repulsive, because we know that, as I say, prior to Zionism, there was no United Nations and there were no human rights groups. We coexisted in the same courtyards. We babysat each other's children. We lived in total harmony. So you see clearly, this has nothing to do with a difference of religion. As I say, we were required to show gratitude, and we teach our children, and we tell them how we should be grateful for these Arab and Muslim countries, whether it is Egypt, Lebanon, Iran, Tunisia, Morocco, and so forth and so on, Jordan. We were living amongst these countries, amongst these people for so many hundreds of years, and we're thankful to them. And of course, in Palestine. So, but the Zionism is, they created a new narrative, and they're creating they built a whole false narrative to make it look like it's a religious conflict. And this is unacceptable. Our rabbis who are alive today still tell us the history that was the recent history that's still alive about how we live together. So the narrative that you are stating about how the Zionists came and simply tried to take over the land and threw out the people who stood in their way and just and assassinated and murdered and so forth, that is a truth. We have again these the pictures and the documentation. We also have some of the statements just to show how duplicitous and how false, the Zionists, that they're the heroes of Jews, that by the Second World War, for instance, the first Prime Minister, Ben Gurion, and this is a quote in our book that we've mentioned in Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, where I'm quoting from a Zionist source, October 18th, 2002, in the Jewish press, and this is a statement when Jews were being murdered at the beginning the beginning of the Second World War. Ben Gurion stated at a meeting, Palestine cannot absorb the Jews of Europe. They were discussing about if the Zionist organizations should help or deter the Jews of Europe to come en masse into Palestine. And he stated, Palestine cannot absorb the Jews of Europe. We want only the best of Jewish youth to come to us. We want only the educated to enter Palestine for the purpose of increasing its culture. The other Jews will have to stay where they are and face whatever fate awaits them. These millions of Jews are dust on the wheels of history and may have to be blown away. We don't want them pouring into Palestine. We don't want Tel Aviv to become another low-grade ghetto. In other words, let them be murdered. We don't want them, because these Jews who look like I do, who are religious Jews, these Jews will make them problems, will not allow them to create a Zionist state. So let them be blown away. They're dust on the wheels of history. They only want the educated, meaning the doctors and lawyers, the ones who are agreeing with the what we would call the assimilated Jews, the ones who, these type of Jews who will support their Zionist state. They're only those Jews. So they thwarted the efforts of saving Jews, and this is their history. This is the true history, what they did to our communities, and this is what they've done to anything that stands, because being that they're not religious, so they don't have God to be the rules, the stick like a ruler to really state what a person has to do. So they lost the morality of godliness. And what people call human rights, we call godliness. They lost that. So they're ready to use our religion and sacrifice on the altar of Zionism the Palestinian people, the Jewish people, and anything that stands in the ways. They accuse and vilify and destroy the lives of people such as you, Dr. Linstad. There's somebody who's standing up and speaking and doing for human rights and so forth. And even though, that how can they do such a thing to such a fine human being like you are, who's doing so much for humanity, it doesn't really matter to them, because anything that stands in their way gets sacrificed on the altar of Zionism.
Yes, Rabbi Weiss, I think this is clarifying indeed the difference between Zionism and Judaism, and it is important indeed that the separation is clear to all of us. And we should be aware that there are many Jewish voices. They call themselves Jewish voices. But we have also to discuss and consider some of these Jewish voices, which is not very sympathetic in some people's mind. I found this news in a Norwegian newspaper recently. It was Israel chief rabbiner Yitzhak Yosef stating that only Jews are to live in the state of Israel. Non-Jews are only allowed to live in this land if they are servants or slaves for the Jewish people in the state of Israel. So again, we have to clarify what kind of thinking is this actually, from where they have this way of thinking, and how this Mr. Rabbiner Yitzhak Yosef, how we can reach the position of chief rabbi in the state of Israel. Please comment on this kind of, we will not call it Jewish thinking, but what kind of thinking is it actually, please?
it's very good you brought that up, because we mentioned this earlier, that there is actually a dual going on, two different worlds. There is the true Jewish world that has these hundreds of thousands of Jews that reside under the oppression of the Zionist state of Israel, and their chief rabbi today, for instance, is not that person that you mentioned, but Rabbi Weiss. He's not a relative of mine. Weiss is a common name in Judaism. This is Rabbi Weiss, and he is actually, you see him in a car going or coming from a demonstration, and they actually attempted to murder him. And when we took him up as chief rabbi there in Palestine, he resides in Al-Quds in Jerusalem. You see literally hundreds of thousands of people greeting him. This is in Kikar Shabbos, I believe, sorry, that's the wrong picture. That picture I just showed you was in Washington, D.C., demonstrating against Netanyahu. But this is the picture of in 2002, because it's a lifelong position, when they took up this rabbi that I just mentioned, Rabbi Weiss, and he should have long and healthy years. As you can see, literally hundreds of thousands of street people. This is just in this Kikar Shabbos, over 10,000 people. And these are the people that are residing in the holy city of Jerusalem. They took up, this is our chief rabbi. Now the Zionism, when they made their so-called Jewish state of non-religious, led by non-religious Jews, which is a direct rebellion against God. We're not allowed, as I mentioned earlier, we're not allowed to have a state, yet they have the audacity, the chutzpah, the hubris of making a state they call the Jewish state. And they made a rabbinate and a chief rabbi for window dressing and an intimidation tactic. Their reason for creating a rabbinate, which is real, not only a farce, but it is just a flagrant a rebellion, a mutiny against God, because they have a state that desecrates the Ten Commandments, the Sabbath. They have non-kosher food is sold there openly. Pig, hog, and on and on. What they're doing to the Palestinian people, clearly against the Torah to have this state, and on and on and on. They dig up graves. We have pictures, many pictures of how the Zionists, in every other country, they understand the sacredness of a body, and that it should not be disturbed. For instance, we were in for instance, in Egypt, and they made the ring road to alleviate traffic, and there was a Jewish cemetery in the middle of the way, so they built pillars. It cost them millions of dollars not to disturb the Jewish graves. By us, it is a most holy issue, a sacred issue, not to disturb the graves. Yet the Zionists flagrantly dig up graves for archaeological purposes. They cut up bodies to study the bodies, to study the parts of the bodies which is forbidden according to Judaism, and on and on and on. They have no respect whatsoever for the religion, for Judaism. Yet this is part and parcel of their so-called Jewish state, which is just a state of evil. And they made a rabbinate so that the world should look at them. Whatever they do, they have the chief rabbi sign off. He traipses around the world and signs off on all their atrocities and criminalities that they commit, and he signs off on that. And the world looks at him, and they wave the star, the flag with the Star of David, and they tell the world he represents God and the Jewish religion and godliness and the Old Testament. And that is how they intimidate, and they get the backing of the evangelistic Christians, millions and millions and millions of people, more than Jewish people that are around the world. And this is how they do it. So we have a rabbinate with a chief rabbi that's been existing from day one, that opposed the existence of the state of Israel and still exists to today. And they're leading our communities and in Palestine. And they created a rabbinate and their chief rabbi. And they have their chief rabbis from the Ashkenazic and Sephardic, and they walk around with who are these people? They're just a leader of a mutiny against God. They are not chief rabbis. They have no right to speak in the name of our holy religion. We never accepted them. We would never allow them to even go up to the Torah in our synagogues. We give them no respect. We do not recognize their validity as not only as chief rabbi, but as a rabbi or even as a practicing Jewish person. It is unacceptable what they're doing. And this is it's just part of the state of Israel. Let us clarify that. So when they have this, they spew these ugly words of claiming that nobody has a right to live there. They don't have a right as a people to live there. They have no right to be there, and they have no right to dictate to others. We have the audacity what they're saying. It's really unacceptable. And if you will come to any country, you will go, as you well know, there's a very large community in England and of Jewish people. The more the religious, the very religious section is in Stamford Hills. You won't see an Israeli flag. You come to New York, right across from Manhattan. The largest concentration of religious Jews is right across from Manhattan. You go over the Williamsburg Bridge, and which connects Manhattan is an island. You go right across the Williamsburg Bridge into Brooklyn. You're going into Williamsburg, New York, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. You will find that there is not one single Israeli flag because it's the largest, very religious community. And you can go up and down miles and you will see Jews all dressed as I do, and there's not one single Israeli flag. And why is that? Because the more the religious you are, the more you oppose the existence, the mere existence of this false so-called state of Israel. And that chief rabbi means nothing to us. He is simply the chief of a den of thieves. That lets us clarify that. And it may be shocking to hear that, but that is a fact. In all our communities around the world, whether it's in Montreal, Canada, whether it's in Argentina, the very religious communities will never even accept them to come as visitors into our synagogues. Their so-called chief rabbi.
I think your speech is very, very important, Rabbi Weiss. I think your position is very, very important, and I think your considerations and your experiences and your position really help and strengthen the movement towards understanding, cooperation, democracy, towards peace in Palestine. So really, we are very proud to have you with us, Rabbi Weiss. We think your position really is important towards peace in Palestine. And we know that you are supporting the Palestinian people. We try to support the Palestinian people. So maybe we should end with a little greeting from some Palestinians, thanking you for your position and welcome you back to this program. We thank you very much, Rabbi Weiss. And greetings to you.
It is an honor, privilege for me to be on your program. And again, I would love to have the great honor of visiting with both in your country, but especially in Palestine. I still remember when you when you arranged and we had a hand in sending the ambulance to Palestine. Would that we could have hand delivered it, and we would love to go and to meet and embrace the Palestinian people, cry with their suffering personally. Once we went 2 or 3 times. We went actually to Gaza because we went through Egypt, and we met with the Palestinian. We cried, we felt what they're hurting, and we pray constantly for God with His compassion that He should bring a speedy and peaceful and total freedom to Palestine. God should help sooner nowadays that it should be a free Palestine, a free Palestine sooner nowadays. And we would love to go and embrace the Palestinian people again. And I wish the word should be spread to them that we have so many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Jews, both in Palestine and Al-Quds and around the world, who suffer and cry and hurt with the Palestinians and pray every day. And we urge everybody to pray every day for the free Palestine.
Together for Palestine. Thank you very, very much, Rabbi Weiss. We hope to see you again soon. And thank you for this interview. Hoping to be together with you soon again. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.